Hello students. The next important question in laws of motion is explain the terms limiting friction, dynamic friction and rolling friction. First, limiting friction. The maximum value of static friction we call limiting friction. What is static friction? Here in our homes we will see almaras, no? So if a single person try to move the almara filled with things, can he move the almara? Impossible. The same almara, if 2-3 members join to push it, then easily they can push the almara. Now what is happening here? First, in case 1, that is a single person moving the almara. Moving the almara means what? He is trying to make the almara to come into the motion, no? Right? He is applying the external force to move the almara. But also the almara is not moving. So that means friction is created between the ground and the legs of almara. So that friction which opposes the motion of almara, or the force which opposes the motion of almara, we call it as friction. Now here, when we call, now this friction created, we call static friction. One thing you have to observe is, there is lot of difference between the book which is in rest position on the table and here the motion of almara. So the books, when we place on the table, they will not fall down. Okay? They will not move by themselves. But it does not comes under friction. We cannot say that static friction is created between the books and table. When we use the word static friction means, when we apply the external force, after applying the external force also, if body doesn't move, then we say that static friction is created between the body and that particular another body, or here almara and ground. So remember the difference. Books just kept on the table will not move, means there is no static friction between them. When we use the word static friction, we can use the word static friction only when you apply the external force. And after applying the external force, if body doesn't move, then we say that static friction is working there. Now the maximum value of this static friction, we call it as a limiting friction. It is denoted by FL. FL is nothing but the maximum static friction, Fs, maximum. Now next, dynamic friction. So in the case of almara, what I said, first when a single person is applying his external force, now he is unable to move the almara, means his force is not enough to move the almara, or we can say that the applied force from by him cannot overcome the static friction. So the external force applied by the single person on the almara cannot overcome the static friction. Now next case, what I said, when 2 to 3 members try to push the almara, then it will move. Means here the external force applied increases. Means this external force overcomes the static friction. This external force overcomes the static friction. So now the body comes into the motion. Now leave the example of almara and let us take another example. Another example as football. When you kick the ball with your leg, the football goes on the ground up to certain extent or certain distance. After going to certain distance, it stops. Why the football stops? Because here you applied the external force. Your force is more enough to overcome the static friction created between the football and the ground. And football came into the motion. And such body in motion comes to the rest. After going to certain distance, it comes to the rest. And the reason for coming for the rest is dynamic or kinetic friction. Okay, so here what happens? When the body is in motion, a friction is created between the body which is in motion and the ground. Here we took the example of football. After kicking the football with the leg, now the ball came into the motion, and now after body is in motion, a friction is created between the body in motion and the ground. So such frictions, the resistance encountered by sliding bodies on the surface, we call it as dynamic or kinematic friction. Here the resistance means opposition created to the motion of the body. So that resistance encountered by the sliding bodies on the surface is called as dynamic or kinetic friction. It is denoted by Fk, K for kinetic. Now here, if the applied force overcomes the limiting friction, body sets into the motion. Then the motion of body is resisted by another friction which we call it as dynamic or kinetic friction. Now the third type of friction is rolling friction. This we see in the case of wheels or rotating bodies, marbles, etc. Cylinders, marbles, wheels. Now here, when you see the rotating bodies such as marble, you throw the marble on any slant surfaces, it just rotates, it moves, and immediately after some time it stops. Why? A kind of friction is created between the rotating body as well as the ground. So this resistance encountered by the rolling body on the surface, we call it as rolling friction. And if wheel or cylinder or spherical body like marble rolls on horizontal surface, the speed of rolling gradually decreases and finally stops due to this rolling friction. So these are the three types of friction. Okay, at the Corona time and Telangana Board of Intermediate paper, maximum he asked this question. So prepare well. You will find these questions more in question papers. Thank you.